Hello and welcome to Business Reporter's The Future of Work campaign. International expansion is a high-stakes transition for organisations. One area where the regulators of any country must not compromise is employment compliance. Follow the regulations or face a heavy price is the message from authorities to your boardroom. How should an organisation conduct a successful expansion? Let's hear the answers from Gunther Eising, CEO at Omnipresent, and George Britton, host of the Global Workforce podcast and director of Go-to-Market at Omnipresent. What are the most important factors an organisation needs to consider when they're looking to expand internationally?
Compliance. The most underrated yet crucial factor when employing internationally is you are fully compliant. What organizations often don't realize is that if it's done well, it is not a burden, it is a competitive advantage.
So before we talk about expansion, could you just give us an idea of what type of expansion we're talking about?
When companies expand, they do this for various reasons. They can, for instance, expand into new markets to solve the talent shortage issue. They could do this in order to attract investment. They sometimes do this because their internal employees move to other locations, and if they want to hold on to such employees, they would need to be able to employ those people in foreign jurisdictions. It could be commercial reasons, market expansion. It could also be the case that a company wants to IPO in a foreign country, for instance. Whatever they are trying to do, it is always a challenge from an employment compliance perspective. And you really want to get this right. If you do get employment compliance right, it is a competitive advantage. If you do get it wrong, you may have serious issues when you want to close a M&A deal, if you want to attract investment, and almost certainly if you want to IPO.
You talked about turning a burden into a competitive advantage. What exactly does that advantage look like?
So if you are in a fundraising race, I would say, because there are always other companies who also talk to the various funds, you want to make sure that you have all the ducks in a row. The way you employ internationally is fully compliant. This will give you a competitive advantage because you are not a risk to the investors and you can close deal faster. When it comes to merger and acquisition, again, if you want to acquire a company, you will not be the only one that is looking at a interesting acquisition target, and you want to make sure that you have answers to this quickly. If you do this right and quick, you will be out-maneuvering the competition.
So you're implying that some organizations are struggling with compliance. So if that's the case, what kind of mistakes are they making?
Yes. So the overarching mistake or shortfall, rather, is that they lack local knowledge. And because of this, you will see a lot of follow-on mistakes that typically happen. And I can give you a couple of examples. One of the things that we see regularly is that companies take a one-size-fits-all approach. And this is very often due to the fact that in-house legal teams or in-house HR teams do not have the capacity to understand all the various jurisdictions. You probably do not have the time and the capacity to fully understand the in and outs of the local situation. That is something that we see fairly regularly. What we also see fairly regularly is that companies pick the wrong methods of expansion. For instance, go for a contract or freelance arrangement, believing that this is compliant and that it is easier, but it can very quickly backfire in the sense that you likely, if not set up correctly, trigger misclassification risks, and this can result in very, very hefty fines. that can backfire very quickly, and it is hefty fines for both, by the way, for the employee and particularly for the employer.
The other thing I'd say here, Alistair, is that oftentimes we see clients assuming that all providers operate in the same way. Let me take employer of record as an example and what we do. So we set up entities in lots of different countries, and we employ people on behalf of our clients who can't set up entities or don't want to set up entities in those countries themselves. We calculate how much it costs and we send them the bill. Really simple. But when you look a level deeper and you start to realise there are certain collective bargaining agreements that need to be adhered to, there are also certain labour leasing laws that apply in certain countries, you quickly realise there are some companies that operate in a compliant way, and there are other companies that skirt around those compliance legislation pieces and operate in a non-compliant way. And that can leave, as Gunther mentioned, both the client and the provider to significant risks if they get caught.
You talk about risks and the potential of fines. Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So examples of things like you might have to find that you're paying backdated taxes in a certain country. You might have fines from the local authorities in the country. You might find that your new funding round or your M&A deal might be delayed or even taken off the table completely if you get this wrong. I'll give you a few scenarios to kind of bring this to life a little bit. Let's say you've got a UK-based company and they employ somebody in Spain for the first time, but instead of hiring them as a full-time employee, they actually decide to hire them as a contractor because it's simpler, it's faster, and it's cheaper. Now that might be fine for a short period, but if they've been working for a longer period of time, they will be deemed as a full-time employee by the local authorities. Now, the issues that can arise here is if let's say that employee goes on sick leave and wants to have sick pay, or they go on parental leave and they want parental pay, they can end up in a dispute with the client themselves. And if you ask any employment lawyer in Spain, they will tell you that you're very unlikely to win that case if it goes to court in Spain. Furthermore, you might have a situation where that client wants to raise funds. During a due diligence process, any kind of legal team or any auditors will spot these liabilities and these risks, and they will highlight them, and that can either delay the deal or take it off the table completely.
But hang on a second, it seems extraordinary to me that you've got an organisation that is at the stage through M&A or however that they're expanding internationally, yet they don't know all the requirements and all the demands of the region that they're going into. I mean, how does that happen?
Yeah, it's a capacity issue, truly, Alistair. Most of the people we speak to, in fact, I've never spoken to anybody who's ever wanted to set up a foreign subsidiary purely for the purpose of employment. There just isn't capacity to do it. You have to go and register the entity, you have to put down deposits and insurances, you have to get directors to actually sign documents, you have to set up bank accounts and all sorts of things in between, let alone understanding the local labour laws and employment laws and understanding that you have to contribute a pension for all of these employees and everything else in between. It's a huge undertaking of work, and it shouldn't be overlooked in terms of how much is actually needed to actually go and execute on this.
So you're saying that organisations are falling short because of a lack of capacity and a lack of understanding. Omnipresent have a solution. Tell us about it.
What we do is we allow companies to employ anywhere in the world internationally through various means. So it might be an employer of record solution, it might be a virtual employer organisation solution, or it might be, if it's a short-term employee, it might actually be a contractor solution, but with some added extras to help you identify and mitigate any risks you might be exposed to along the way.
Give us an example of this in action and how it really works.
So let me talk about Germany. Germany is a really good example of a country that's got very, very tight labour laws, and you really need to balance compliance with business need. Now, in order to operate as an employer of record in Germany in a compliant way, you need to have what's called an AUG license. The downside of using an AUG license is you can only employ people for up to a period of 18 months as a maximum, and that's stated in your license, but also in all of the employment contracts that you have with these employees. So what other providers might do is they might just not use that licensed operating model. They might just use a regular German entity, which can expose them and the client to up to 30,000 euros in fines if they get caught. Now, what we've developed is a twofold solution. So we can operate using that license model that I mentioned, but we can also allow clients to register as a foreign direct employer. We call this our virtual employer organisation model, or VEO model, and that allows us to balance that business need with compliance with a fully regulated service we're providing.
Okay, so let's say I'm an organisation, I'm looking to expand internationally, and I've decided I'm going to work with you at Omnipresent. Talk me through the process of how we're going to work together.
Step one would be a consultation to understand exactly who are you looking to hire and which countries you're looking to hire in, and give you some recommendations based off of all of your requirements on the model that you would that we would put forward. We'd then bring in our different expert teams, so our legal team, benefits team, HR teams, to make sure that both our clients and the employees transition on board in the smoothest way possible.
We've talked a lot during this interview about compliance, about organisations who are finding it difficult to comply for whatever reason. If you wanted to summarise what we've been talking about as some key takeaways, what would you say?
Number one, cross-border employment is really difficult. Make sure to get it right, and you can turn a burden into a competitive advantage. Secondly, make sure to pick the right methods to expand. This will be different for every employee in the various different countries. And it could be an employee of record arrangement, it could be a contractor arrangement, it could be the VEO arrangement, and so forth. And then finally, number three, not all employer of record services are built the same. Not even the biggest provider on the market would be able to operate in fully compliantly in all the various jurisdictions. So choose wisely. Remember, if things go wrong, it will be you that needs to sort out the fallouts.
That was Gunther Eisinger and George Britton from Omnipresent.